Hi, everyone. Welcome to the spring EdCollab gathering. I'm so excited to be here with my colleague and friend, Julia Torres. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us. We are going to kick things off by talking about a lot of exciting things today. Book challenges, how we maintain book joy, how we stay connected to our reading selves. So, we are going to be sharing our thinking and going beyond just doing book talks to talk about so much more.
Absolutely.
We're going to kick things off by just talking about the obvious, which is the fact that we have a lot of book challenges, or in library land, we call it reconsiderations that are happening. You can see here on it's my right, hopefully it's your right too. You can see the map of the US. If you're joining us from outside the US, then this is what we are looking at in the US right now. Your map might be a little bit different. But you can see there are various places where the banning or the reconsideration requests are more prevalent than in other states. The types of stories that are banned are predominantly those with protagonists identifying as BIPOC, that's Black, Indigenous, or other people of color. The second biggest group of stories that are banned are those containing LGBTQ plus characters or topics. So you can see that the two biggest groups of banned books, or books that people are asking to be reconsidered or even removed, in some places they're actually removing them themselves from library shelves, have to do with identities, people of color and those identifying as LGBTQ plus. Something that we would like you to think about is the fact that people, in essence, are dehumanizing others through these actions. And something that we want to present today are a lot of stories that will offer up an entry point to talk and think about identity and to learn about identities other than one's own, perhaps. So that we can have a more inclusive society. Because the problem and the reason why a lot of these books are challenged or banned is because people did not have exposure either in life or through story to identities that were different from their own. And so in order to break that cycle, we've got to have more of these stories in our schools and libraries rather than fewer.
Absolutely. And Julia and I want you to know that you're not alone in this work. We have the opportunity to pull from a variety of places and resources, including our fall gathering at the Ed Collab, where we had a collection of curated resources to help people to thoughtfully and proactively respond to book challenges. As you can see, the numbers continue to increase, and it's almost inevitable that this isn't proactive anymore. And unfortunately, we need to take a stand, and we need to have some opportunities to fight back for our kids, because if we're doing this work and we're focusing on books, and investing in books is an investment in kids. And anytime we take a book off the shelf, we're hurting or harming the kids in our classroom and in our world. So we want you to know that there are a variety of resources that you can turn to. We'll drop the links during the chat when it goes live as well. And certainly you can use the QR codes to view and to access the action toolkit that was put together by ALA and a variety of partners. And again, the resources that were already shared with you through EdCollab. And so moving forward, we want to talk about how this attack on intellectual freedom is an attack on the rights of a reader. And so Julia and I included, of course, the very thoughtful and helpful visual poster that was done in a much more lighthearted approach by Daniel Pennick. And we want you to consider not focusing on just the rights of the reader, but the rights of humans and humanity and the human part of readers. And so thinking about how every book is an opportunity to invite a conversation. And it's those conversations that our students have where they're learning to expand their perspectives, their experiences, their understanding, and they can grow as they learn more about themselves, others, and the world through the power of story.
And we tell our own stories in our two books, Layers of Learning and Liven Up Your Library, Design Engaging and Inclusive Programs for Tweens and Teens, co-authored by my fabulous co-author, Valerie Tago. So, in both books, you're going to learn about our perspectives, but also stories that we tell from the front lines, the experiences that we have had in the classroom, working with teachers, and in my case, working in the library. Core Values in School Librarianship is a book that has a lot of vignettes or shorter pieces that helps us remember our commitment to our values exercise through school librarianship, but if you're a classroom teacher, what does that look like in your classroom environment? And then we're going to keep on talking. I'm really excited about is a collaboration between Matthew R.K. and Jen Orr. And it talks about how to lead meaningful race conversations in the elementary classroom. There is a counterpart for the secondary classroom, but we wanted to offer up these professional learning resources to help folks that are not only thinking about the skills-based approach to getting young people to read fluently and frequently, but also how do we have conversations about what we're reading and how do we grow as individuals and communities as we have conversations about what we're reading.
Yeah. So we've given you some of the heavy stuff. We front loaded with some heavy stuff because we know that we're dealing with some times right now that are very challenging for teachers, for educators, for students. And so, having said all of that, Julia and I want to go back to helping you find some book joy. So as you're doing this work, you can balance the challenges and also the rewards of having a book as a co-teacher and having the beauty of story to guide you in your work with students. So as we said, we're going to be thinking and talking about ways to share these books and to think about and beyond these titles. So we wanted to start by mentioning, of course, the work of Dr. Goldie Muhammad. And we love this quote where she says that joy should be the ultimate goal of teaching and learning. And we really hope that you'll hold on to joy in these times and always. And so, what better thing to do than to talk about some books that have brought us joy? Yes, of course. Julia, would you like to talk about Unearthing Joy?
I can just say that Dr. Muhammad is somebody who I deeply admire and respect. And I think that her courage in talking about joy in times when school has become a place, especially for older young people, our teens and tweens, it has become a place where our young people often feel, I hate to say it, but unsafe. And sometimes many of them don't feel supported. So I really want to commend Dr. Muhammad for reminding us to always come back to joy. And then I also just wanted to say that one of my favorite things about Cultivating Genius is that it opens up the doors for us to continue to talk about what makes school an enjoyable experience for young people. We can't lose sight of that in the face of all of our adult agendas that we often skew toward. We have our mission, we have our calling, we have our directives from various people, but we can't forget that our primary goal, our primary task is to make sure that the experience of learning is a joyful one that will continue even after young people leave the K through 12 school system.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because we talk about books and we talk about joy in books, and that has a ripple effect. Oftentimes we talk about book love having a ripple effect, and it is a real research-based approach to the reality of kids who love to read in school will read outside of school, and they will read on in life, and they will become literate, successful individuals. And that happens when those opportunities are nurtured in school. So, in thinking about joy and joyful titles for the elementary and the primary kids, I wanted to mention a few titles that all speak to joy, like a simple book by June Tate that just has an absolute fabulous glimpse at everyday moments that bring us joy. And all of these books, again, we want you to think about thinking about and beyond. We'll invite conversations to then encourage kids to share what brings them joy. What are the everyday moments about the things that they love? Or Me Gusta, which is by Angela Dominguez in a bilingual text that also looks to celebrate things that we like and things that we love. And again, encouraging kids to share the ways in which they find joy. And I absolutely love the series by Renee Watson about Ryan, her character Ryan, a Ryan Hart story. And in this, finding again simple but beautiful ways to celebrate joy in our classrooms. And that's a great series if you don't know of the Renee Watson work for young people.
And for our older readers, or really for readers of any age, I've got three recommendations here that two of them I was just looking at and they happen to be nonfiction. One is fiction, but all three celebrate things and people in life that bring joy. I'm really just going to quickly talk about them because I think that we have to keep moving at a pretty brisk pace to cover all of the books that we want to talk about. But the first, of course, is about not only winning the National Spelling Bee, but finding the greatness within yourself. I think that would be an excellent pairing with Michelle Obama's Becoming, by the way. It's a guide about how to be awesome at life. And it just occurred to me, too, that it would be a really good pairing with this one. This is called Troublemaker Rising, a Fear Fighter's Manual for Teens by Lovey Jones. So it occurred to me that those two go hand in hand. So this is kind of about joy, but also about finding the courage within yourself to be great and unapologetic about that greatness. Notes from a Black young chef, our young Black chef, is a similar type of energy, how to find the greatness within yourself, share it with other people, but also be unapologetic about that. And then Only This Beautiful Moment is about finding love in a community that would ostracize you for loving who you want to love. I want to give you just enough to be interested, but not so much that I ruin it. So I will just say that this book is for people in it's for all people, but it's also for readers that grow up in communities that don't always support loving yourself. So I'll say that. Next, please.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. So we would like to invite you to take a moment, if you're watching this with colleagues, to pause and to encourage a conversation where you can take a moment to think about joy. How do you hold on to joy? What titles do you recommend or do you turn to that center joy in the storyline? And then maybe think about what those things are that make them have that thread of joy, or perhaps what or who is missing, and then continue to curate and expand on this list. Maybe you'll be invited to think through or beyond a title we shared today, or as Julia just did, reach for something else that you're reminded of. So we hope that you will pause, whether you're with your colleagues today or maybe even at a later point, to continue to do this work, because it's never about just that book. It's about books that help you do this work. So we also wanted to spend some time, since we're talking about book joy, to just focus on books that help celebrate reading and story. And so all of these books have something very similar in common in the theme that we are looking at books and stories that celebrate reading in libraries, reading in the home, reading and the power of story. So you'll notice Nikki Giovanni's A Library, which is really could become a beautiful list poem for kids. And I've done that work with some of the students I'm privileged to serve, where kids then make a list of what a library is for them. Likewise, with This Is a Story by John Chu and Lauren Castillo, thinking about how kids can expand on the idea of story. Or Grace Lynn and Kate Mesner's collaboration in Once Upon a Book, thinking about the pages of a book and what it brings to your own imagination and how we can go inside of a book. And then two stories that kind of speak to belonging and breaking stereotypes. The Loud Librarian, on a much more simple, humorous way, is about a young child who celebrates books and loves taking on the role of a librarian, a student librarian, but she wants to break that stereotype of being quiet in the library because she's quite loud and excited and joyful about reading. And the other book on that page, Everything in Its Place, is a really beautiful story that has a subtitle, and it's about books and belonging. And it's about a child who, there was a line in one of the books, and I know we're trying to go quickly, but it's like, who needs recess when you can shelve books? And I just love that this is about a story where it looks at a character who has found their happy place in a library and in a book, and learns the meaning of belonging at a variety of levels.
Sorry about that. That is my dog, and he will make his presence known every time I'm doing a presentation without fail. So I apologize for that. I was in conversation recently with the author of The Vanquishers. So, what I wanted to celebrate or recognize with this slide were some experiences that are a little bit supernatural or outside of the everyday life. I think that our young people right now can use a little bit more imagination and a little bit more recognition of the power of creativity. So, The Vanquishers is really about four kids that are going through their town and trying to vanquish vampires. They are sort of like vampire hunters, but they're young. And so it's an adventure story, but it's also got a little bit of the supernatural, and it's a really fun read. Healer of the Water Monster is indigenous. It is a book by Brian Young, who identifies as Navajo. I just heard him speak as well in Arizona, and he was fabulous. And I think one of the things that we can recognize is that this book does the work of both giving representation and helping us learn more about Navajo culture, but it also has an adventure story with the water monster, and it has a protagonist that is kind of discovering himself and his ties to his community through the process of the adventure story with a monster at the center. And then The Curse on Spectacle Key is a story about by Chantal Acevedo. It involves two kids that are sort of solving a mystery at the same time, and it's really challenging to tell you enough without ruining it. Just know that if you like ghost stories, if you like mystery, if you like a story that is going to involve two characters that are kind of at odds with one another, but also working as a team. And as typical of all middle grade stories, they learn about themselves along the journey. I think that that would be a good adventure for you or for your young readers. I hope I did a good job of talking about that.
I think you did a great job. And I love that Julia was saying, and if you like this, and if you like that. And that is the most important entry point into recommending a book, right? Finding out who we're asking or who we're learning about to help them find the next book in their journey as a reader. And so when we ask those questions, what do you like? What might interest you? We can help them find that match. And so it's just about those three simple steps, right? Reading kids, reading books, and repeating and researching and having them invest in that same process and asking those questions and being considerate of what might help turn them in and on to being a reader, right? And getting
Connect
it.
with your librarians, right? Because
Yeah.
librarians can be some of the greatest partners in this work.
Absolutely. And that's, we said it in the beginning, you are not alone. Seek out your reading advisors, seek out your school librarians. The book that Julia mentioned about the core values in librarianship has an excellent piece by Kelly Gustafson, who is a Pennsylvania administrator, literacy leader. And she often talks about how we need to turn to our administrators as allies. And so tap into all of the individuals with whom you can collaborate and you can celebrate reading and celebrate books and find the books that are going to excite and get your kids buzzing about reading. So if we go back, we are talking about joyful experiences, but we have to also think about exploring all the feels. And so I put this trifecta of three books up for you by Rachel Vale, because if you are familiar with this, it's one that I've talked about again and again, sometimes on Bombaloo, is the first in this series of Big Feelings books. And then there's a new one that came out last year, Sometimes I Grumble Switch. And now the newest one, which is Sometimes I Kaploom. And I know it's really silly about thinking about all of these made up words, but we're putting a name to a feeling. So whether it's because you're feeling angry or because you're grumble squinch and holding it in, or because you're scared and feeling kaploom, it's all of those feelings are being recognized and acknowledged and validated. And so when we're searching for books that are going to help explore all the feels, we have to recognize that it's okay to feel whatever that feeling may be. In a little while, Julie and I are going to talk about the power of author's notes in books. And there is an author's note in here by Rachel Vale. There's also one by the illustrator. And we get an inside glimpse into a little bit more about their process. And one of the things that I love in here in this note by Rachel Vale is that she talks about how kids deserve, and she's actually talking to the reader in the note, how you deserve the deluxe ticket to the entire grand buffet of human emotions, all you can feel. And when we have books to help us support the conversations around all those feelings, I think that's a win-win.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think that as we are progressing into the teen and tween years, sometimes what can happen is we are more internal with how we process the world around us, but the feelings are all over the place, as you know. So I've chosen three books here that I feel will really help you navigate conversations, but also help young people feel seen. Don't Call Me Crazy is 33 voices to start the conversation about mental health. I think that there are a lot of young people these days that don't necessarily know, but they might be struggling with depression, anxiety, and rather than having somebody tell them how they feel, I think that it helps to read the stories of someone else who feels the same way. Unbroken is 13 stories starring disabled teens. This is not a new book, but I have always loved it, and it's always been in any library that I have been responsible for. And I highly recommend that it be a part of the classroom library if it is not a part of your central library, or if you don't have a central library. I think that disability is something that we have started to recognize more and talk more openly about, but I still think we've got a ways to go. And so, again, this is 13 stories that are starring disabled teens. So it elevates and helps us understand that the experience of living with a disability isn't necessarily the only experience or the only identity marker that someone might have, but it is one that we should recognize and not just ignore or pretend doesn't exist. And then Beyond the Gender Binary is a super interesting book. I love these Pocket Change Collective books that Penguin Random House has. There are many of them. If you haven't seen them, I don't have any right now, right here, but they're about this big. They're very small, and the font is a little bit smaller, but they're also really thin. And what I like about them is that they cover what could be perceived as heavy topics, but are kind of intriguing. And that one in particular is really important for folks who do not understand the conversation, the science, the sociology behind the way that we gender identify. It's not the same in every culture, and opening up space for people to learn more is really important. And that's an important part of helping today's young people feel seen as well. Many of today's young people.
Thank you, Julia. I love the importance of, finding books that are going to help affirm all aspects of kids' identities. And so even when we start these conversations with our young people, here's an example from a pre-K class that I have the privilege of working with in school. And I wanted to mention two books to help do this work for young people. And that comes from the Juana Medina series, I Am. And there's I Am, I Will, and I Feel. And they're all just simple little books that, like Julia said, sometimes less is more. And when we look through a text in this way, if we have an opportunity to see affirming statements and the repetition of that with just little reminders or little statements, it encourages kids to think about and beyond the book and how that pertains to their own lives and who they are and what they will do, and to really celebrate that greatness once again.
And I wanted to talk about one of my favorite authors, Octavia Octavia Butler. Sorry. You may or may not know the story of how she wrote her future on the back of her journal. Share this with young people. If you are having them do writer's notebooks or journal about their future, I think that envisioning what we want for the future is one of the most powerful tools for helping young people overcome some of the heavier realities of being alive and existing in this particularly tumultuous time. I love how she underlined bestseller, how she underlined reach the top and stay on top. So be it, see to it. So show that to young people. Make an Octavia Butler display with her books. If you're teaching Kindred, this has got to be part of what you teach as well. The ability to envision the future is incredible. You should know that Octavia Butler, Ibi Zoboi wrote a novel in verse about Octavia Butler called Star Child, and there is an educator guide that I authored as well that goes along with it. So if you choose to include that in your curriculum, I highly recommend it. And you should know that she is one of our kind of unsung heroes when it comes to imagining a future that is better than the world that we live in. So I think that we should give her due. And she's also a great example for young people.
I love that. I love that we have this opportunity to go back and to look at this text and to look at this as a model for kids. And every book that we look at, having the opportunity for finding something for kids to see that they can then write in this way or be inspired to live in this way. And that's what books are all about. When we're finding these books, it's not just about reading the story, it's recognizing what's going on and understanding how that might influence our perspective, deepen our understanding about ways of living and ways of being. And she's such a wonderful example. I can't wait to see. And if you do invite your students to do this work, please share with us. We would love to hear from you at the EdCollab, and you could certainly email Julia and I as well. We'd love to see it. We do love seeing the literacy snapshots to go with the text and what the text inspired. So in a similar way, going back to a book that's a favorite, or I should say a fan favorite for some of the younger students that I am privileged to work with, kids talking about their own greatness and recognizing, just like Lou, which is about a fire hydrant, who is he is often, he's often used as a, we'll say, toilet, excuse me, and it's pretty funny and gets kids laughing a lot. But in the end, he realizes that he's full of greatness and he just doesn't realize what it is. And when he realizes his ability to be so helpful, he says he's a superhero. And it really invites wonderful conversations with kids to think about their superpowers, to think about what makes them special, to think about what their greatness is, as you can see on the chart that I just shared. So in addition, thinking about charts, I wanted to talk a little bit, and Julia and I were both going back and forth about thinking about how when we find joy, we want to find some books that just help us to delight in the power of pictures and words. And so I wanted to just highlight three texts briefly that I'm loving in the moment. And one is Dear Mr. G, because it's a celebration of community. It's a celebration of friendship and a young boy who is friendly with his neighbor. They constantly write letters back and forth with one another. And so it's this opportunity to really celebrate letter writing and just different forms of communication. And again, to serve as a model and a mentor text for kids to do that and to think about ways they can engage with members of their community, elders, get opportunities to learn and to share pieces of advice and information. And that's sort of what happens with Dear Mr. G. Another book that I am obsessing with right now for primary students is this book that is called My Dog Just Speaks Spanish, and it's by Andrea Caceres, and it's not out yet. It's out very soon, I believe early May, and it's about her experience where she comes with her dog to learn and learns English herself, and she's so excited that she knows English, but her dog does not. And so every time she is going throughout the neighborhood and she's meeting different people, she's trying to explain to them that her dog only understands Spanish and only understands Spanish commands. But if you notice, and if hopefully you can see throughout the book, all of the information about her environment or her community are text labels that she has little post-its for both those words in English and Spanish, which is a wonderful opportunity to celebrate the beauty and brilliance of multiple languages. And so I wanted to share that text. And another text that I'm really excited about because it's so unique and I've not seen anything done like this before is this text called Friends Beyond Measure. And it is entire story told through infographics by Lena Fisher. And every page, not only is it talking about their friendship and the things that they've done, has a different form of an infographic or a chart. So it starts off with a Venn diagram so kids can describe and explain how they are like or unlike their friends. It then has an example that has a map that celebrates the number of hours that they do things. There's also a timeline of their activities and so on and so forth. And in the back, there's a little author's note about all of the charts that are represented within the text, which is a really fun and inspiring way to teach and connect kids to the use of infographics. So I was excited to share that one with you as well.
I'm writing these down because I want to check some of these books out from the library because I don't often delve into the land of picture books. And a lot of these looked so good.
That's why I love doing this with you, Julia, because you and I get to bounce off of each other. You get to up my game in the YA world, and we get to celebrate the beauty of books that we're going to leave here together today and be like, okay, let's talk. What did you know? What else do you want to see? So please, please share with us. Hopefully, you will share some of the exciting titles that get you buzzing as well, so that Julie and I can continue to grow our list and our enthusiasm for reading and reading together. On the note of power of words, we have to value and leverage poetry all year long. So I could put any number of new titles on here. I just chose a few. I put some on here, like, of course, Kwame Alexander's newest with Melissa Sweet, where he's writing about how to write a poem, and it's illustrated just as beautifully. And I said that it was Melissa Sweet, and now I have to look on my shelf to see that if I'm correct. I apologize. I might have said the wrong illustrator's name.
It looks like
But
it. You're right.
that's a series also that he has. The companion was to how to read a book, and now is how to write a poem. And then of course they're the newest in Charles R. Smith Jr.'s um, sports royalty series. That's what they're rebranding and renaming some of the books that he's done. He has a Hoop Kings 2.0 and a Soccer Queens book, which is great and perfect in time for the World Cup for soccer, and he looks at and celebrates women in soccer and some of those opportunities to get kids to think about sports in poetry. And then, of course, some beautiful informational texts that also look at poetry through the lens of humor and also just being entertaining and informative for kids. And all of these and any form of poetry that you look at can tie back to how are we connecting passions in the writing of poetry and give kids permission to write about what they love and what they care about in any form. And poetry is certainly a beautiful way to do that, so that we're emphasizing process and not product and just playing with words. It's a beautiful opportunity.
And I'm just really quickly going to talk about these three. Respect the Mic is a awesome compilation that is celebrating 20 years of poetry from a high school in the Chicago area. I think what's really unique and awesome about it is that it's edited by Hanif Abdurraqib and Franny Choi. I'm a huge Hanif Abdurraqib fan. So if you have not read his stuff, if you haven't heard of him, please do so. But Respect the Mic is definitely an anthology that you could use in the classroom, and it'll have a lot of different themes because it's poetry authored by a lot of different young people. Everybody Looking is a novel in verse. I think that it didn't get nearly as much acclaim or accolades as it should have, even though it did make it to the finals of the National Book Awards. It is, I think, really unique in that it covers that period between high school and college. So it gets you to explore what it means to leave home. What parts of yourself are you going to take with, and what are you going to leave behind? And then Abuela, Don't Forget Me is a beautiful book as well. That is a novel in verse that is going to, or lots of different poems, sorry, not a novel in verse, but all thematically related to the relationship with one's grandmother or with the elders in our family. I was very close to my grandfather, so this book really resonated with me. And I think that our family relationships, those that we have, whether they are found family or born family, are really sacred. And so this is a book that will open up space for conversations about that.
I love how you said that, Julia. That was beautiful. Um, so we wanted to just briefly touch upon some series and highlight some newer series. You could certainly screenshot this, pause, and reflect at your leisure. We just wanted to give you access to some newer titles from some voices that maybe haven't been on your shelf before, because oftentimes when teachers are doing an inventory of some of the texts that they have, they may have some series that have been used in the past, and they're always on or kids should be at least, in search of newer series and just finding out that that now book that they're reading, if it's in a series, will lead them to their next book. So these are just some few of our favorites that we are excited about. And there's so many more. And certainly being on the path or a search for series is going to lead you for the books that kids are going to eat up and go for again and again, like the manga.
Yeah, and we would be remiss if we did not talk about manga. And if you don't know who this is, you should know that this is Tanjiro from Demon Slayer. If you don't know, you need to at least watch the first episode of Demon Slayer. I think it's on Netflix. This QR code is going to take you to an article about the 10 best-selling manga of all time. There are many librarians out there who will tell you what manga the young people cannot put down. Ask your librarians. I'm aware that there is blood, there is a knife, there is a questionably clothed woman in this picture. However, I also think that we have to recognize that manga has themes of heroism, and there is so much worthy of discussion and study. So it's not just violence and questionably clothed female characters. There are lots of female characters, especially in Demon Slayer, that are actually warriors themselves, and they slay demons and they're really good at it. So I think that I put this slide on here really because we want to make sure that we acknowledge how many young people love manga and can't put it down and who read the series. And it's a great gateway into other types of reading. You can find themes or characters in manga and then connect those to themes or characters in other books. So look at that as an opportunity, not as, oh, this young person will only read manga, or we ask that you consider that.
Absolutely. Definitely consider and let kids read what they want to read. That's the whole point. And I love how Julia mentioned, this is a QR code that will lead you to the 10 best selling opportunities in this genre. Go seek out your librarians. Ask them what was taken out most often in your building. Some of the librarians that I'm privileged to work with, they do surveys all year long. They get that information so that it can help guide the decisions that they make in terms of book purchases for the following year, in terms of weeding out certain texts from their library, and even in search of series, thinking about going back to your librarians and asking them what were some of the most popular series that were taken out and where were their gaps, what were we missing. And so certainly tapping into your reading advisors. I often think that it's important too, when you find a title, to do a little research around the author and find out how that author might serve as a mentor. For example, Kelly Starling Lyons has so many beautiful picture books like My Hands Tell a Story, Going Down Home with Daddy, Lift Every Voice and Sing. I know there are more, but leading into a journey with your kids to find out and to investigate what else is out there by particular authors will give them an opportunity to find another book or to recommend books themselves to other students or other family members. So for example, you might be a middle school student who really appreciated and loved My Hands Tell a Story because of the fact that there's such a beautiful opportunity to discuss a identity map or to create your own version of that, which is modeled in the book, or to think about going down home with daddy and to tell stories. You've written memoir, but perhaps you have younger siblings or want to engage in a conversation with other readers about what else is out there. And you can see she has from every grade level a series, Ties Travels, going up, moving up to Jada Jones, that series for with a female lead character, and then Miles Lewis, which I think the third book is now out in that series that has sort of a STEM connection in a spinoff from all of these connected characters. So find out who's out there, look for those mentors, and that will again take you from your now to your next book as you're buzzing.
So speaking of mentor texts, these three, I think you couldn't get much better than to look at the craft of writing as it shows up. You can see all the stickers on the covers. These are three of my favorites for helping teach young people the craft of writing. There are some folks who I think have a hard time getting a young person to grab on to a story and stick with it until the end. You won't have a hard time with these three books. I hear often that people keep coming back To Kill a Mockingbird, for example, and they have no problem giving that to young people over and over again, but they don't try necessarily to use tools like these for teaching the art of storytelling, but also the craft of writing, and that is a missed opportunity. There are different things that each of these texts offers, and I would just encourage you to get these books and read them in your team of educators. If you have not seen or heard of them, they were discussed extensively in the Book Club Foundation Summer Book Club and in other conversations. And I will tell you that I plan myself on doing a book club in various library branches in my library district with the Last Cuentista. And I'm working on a project for Me Moth right now that I think people will probably be happy with. And Apple Skin to the Core is another one that I think was underestimated. People come back all the time to Sherman Alexie and say how much they love teaching Sherman Alexie, but people don't give Apple Skin to the Core a chance. And I think it is a beautifully written text that has complex themes that a lot of our young people can identify with, not just those identifying as Native.
We mentioned earlier the importance of using informational text and also searching for author's notes within every text. And so these are just three that I want to highlight. And one is Kwame Alexander's An American Story, which came out this year. And I'm sure I texted Kwame and said, I'm going to need a bigger shelf because I'm sure it's going to get awards, because not only is his work and his writing absolutely amazing, but the illustrations by Dare Coulter are absolutely breathtaking. And so that author's note gives a glimpse to kids to understanding that this book was written, Kwame got the idea because of a racially charged incident that happened in his child's school. And then in a parent teacher conference, realizing that his child's teacher was really, like so many teachers, uncomfortable about teaching slavery. And so his attempt to give a gift to teachers, which I think this book is a gift to teachers, about discussing slavery and the impact and trauma, but also a way of speaking truth and finding a way to take unjust history and wrap it in book love. And I think that's probably one of the things that I love about this book so much, An American Story. And then the two books on the right, Yes, We Will. Kelly Yang put together a collection of short biographical pieces about amazing, inspirational Asian Americans who've influenced us and with their accomplishments, which is just an empowering celebration. And also, I love that that book was put together by a variety of Asian American illustrators as well. So there's that pairing in there, and it leads to an investigation of additional texts, of additional artwork, and again, exploring and expanding beyond that book. And then the last one on that page is Your Life, and that is by Bo Fee. And in his text, which was again like a poem turned into a picture book to affirm Asian American life and young people, and to also show the beauty and the complexity of all aspects of identities. But the author's note in there is so powerful because he talks about how he was moved to write that book because of the ongoing racism against and anti-Asian hate crimes that really kind of, was exacerbated during the pandemic. And the note that he puts in there in thanking those who are not Asian Americans for reading this book and going beyond their experience. And that's what I think all books are so powerful for. So, um, author's notes, the gift that keeps on giving. I'm jumping. Go ahead.
I'll just really quickly, these books here invite conversation about trying to be perfect in a community that may or may not accept you. Boundless offers conversation about being multicultural and multiracial, which I think is something that all people could use learning a little bit more about, rather than just needing for someone, especially in the United States, this is the case, needing for someone to fit into one specific category, but allowing for all of, as my friend Jose Vilson says, the multitudes that we contain. So Boundless is an anthology about that. And then A Year to the Day is beautiful because I think that it will open up space for conversation about grief and loss. at the end, at the bottom there, it says every ending has a beginning, and the story actually starts with the end. So that's kind of a play on words there, but it starts with a family in the aftermath of loss and how they cope with it. And I think it has a really beautiful way that it comes full circle. I also wrote an educator guide for this. If you decide you want to have a discussion about it in your classroom, it's available. But one thing that I just really enjoyed about reading this book was that each of the characters will surprise you with how they cope with grief and loss. Hungry Ghost, I think that the most important thing that you should know about that is that it's newer and it offers an opportunity to talk and think about the pressures that we put on ourselves and on family, without meaning to, but um, the intergenerational pressure that is passed on from caregiver to child, and through grandparent to caregiver. It's something that continues. I said intergenerational already. I don't need to say it again. Okay.
All right. So we started this conversation about how we need to talk about and support and really, really guard intellectual freedom and guard the right to read. This week was Right to Read Day, and every day should be a right to read day, right? And so if you are struggling or thinking through some of the conversations that you're having, and you want to be able to talk back to administrators or families or community members, these are two books that will invite fabulous conversations because they deal with book banning. On the middle grade level, early to elementary middle grade level is Amy Sarah King, A.S. King's book, Attack of the Black Rectangles. And then, of course, David Levithan's book for middle to upper, Answers in the Pages, which I'd have to say were probably two of my most favorite books this year. And if you have not read these books, especially with all of the conversations that are happening around book banning and the pressures that teachers are feeling, I do truly believe this is a book that I would even want to put into the hands of board members who were complaining or family members who had questions, because it's going to open up lines of communication and opportunities, just as we ask of our kids to be expanding their perspectives and their viewpoints and to be learning through story. So we hope that you will enjoy those books, and we hope that you'll enjoy some of the books that we shared. And we wanted to leave you with some thoughts about what might be next. And so here are some takeaways. Perhaps you want to consider a BYOB. Julia, you could share. Of course, you have created a lovely little QR code so that we can continue to share and leverage our own connections to one another's in talking about books.
And we want to encourage you to reach out if you have questions about how to tackle what some people consider to be tough topics in the classroom or in the library. We don't want to continue to call them difficult conversations, only because when we call them that, we believe that they can become that. Our language does have power. So let's call them courageous conversations as we borrow from the Courageous Conversations people and work. Let's adopt that framework among many others as we learn to have the conversations we need to have to make brave spaces, and also to, one of the things that we want to always remember is we want to create humanizing spaces in our classrooms and in our libraries. We don't want to contribute to the forces that dehumanize. So we can be a part of the solution to help with healing in educational spaces. And we hope that we've shared some books with you today that will aid you in that work.
Yeah, so that you can hold on to the joy and you can share with us. Please feel free to use this QR code to drop us a note, share a title, share your comments, and we can continue to let our collective love of reading grow. Julie and I are available at the EdCollab. You can certainly reach out to us through that website, or you can follow us on Twitter. You can find our emails. You can contact us. You can ask an ambassador a question if you like, and certainly hold on to the joy. Think of us, share with us, and grow with us. Thank you for joining us today. Really excited that you were here.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.